Let's talk about a potential star emerging at practice and what it could mean for this Badgers football team. Let's go.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Badger fans? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Ryan Herrings. Thank you for making this your first listen every single day and for being an everydayer. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $250 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Today's episode, man, we are talking about Nicolas Clayton emerging at practice, a potential star for this Badgers team. Plus, big, really interesting conversations and comments from Coach Tressel and Coach Mitchell on the defensive side about that front seven and what they're going to be doing a little differently. But let's start with Nick Clayton. Nicolas Clayton, four-star freshman, coming in, enrolled early, high physical upside. We talked about it when he enrolled. We talked about it when he picked Wisconsin. We said this could be one of the gems of this class because Clayton gives you something completely unique on this roster. There's just not many players with his burst and his bend and his speed off the size. Four-star edge rusher from Florida, a kid that Florida State wanted, other big-time schools wanted. This was a massive recruiting win for the Badgers. One of the 2 or 3 biggest wins I think they had last year with a Carter Smith and a Jalen Williams, and a couple other pieces in there for sure. Some of the offensive linemen, Mason Posa, but this is right up there. And we're already starting to get reports of starting to play with the twos. I've really good comments from Coach Mitchell, the linebackers coach, on him. But I want to start with the concern we had. Like Clayton coming in, he was a $197 in high school, $195, and we kind of said, all the physical tools in the world, he might need a year to get up to size. He might need a year to get to 220 or 230. Brady Collins, he's already got him to 220. So you've already put on the weight because you can play at 220 as an edge rusher coming in on third down in the Big Ten. You can absolutely do that. Situationally, you're not going to ask Clayton to hold the point of attack. You're not going to ask him to, stand up to a counter guard that's pulling it from Iowa and stop him in his tracks there and blow up a running play. But you are going to ask him, hey, 3rd and 7, bend the edge and create havoc in the pocket. He can do that as a freshman. You can do that as an edge rusher as a freshman because he has all the physical skills to do it, and he gives you something. I don't know if there's another guy on the roster. Maybe it's Cheeks. Cheeks can, I thought Sebastian Cheeks last year really gave you some burst off the edge. He might be the only guy, though, that I would throw up there with Clayton in terms of just somebody who is bursty off the edge, can really explode, can really rock an offensive lineman back with his speed and quickness. He's unique, man. And now that he's at 220 pounds, he's getting reps with the number 2s. This is what Matt Mitchell had to say about him, Coach Mitchell. I thought this was really good. Quote, he's definitely on a path, to help us in the fall. And I think probably that role is going to be a pass rusher and an impactful guy. Coach Mitchell went on to say, I'm not here to make promises, but this is a true freshman that's already flashing. You have to take that serious. And especially on a team that struggled so mightily. Tackles for loss last year, last in the country. That's still a mind-blowing number. It's still an absolutely shocking and unbelievable and inexcusable, pathetic number. I'll just call it what it is. That is so pathetic. You were last in the country in tackles for loss last year, 134 out of 134. Northwestern finished ahead of you. It was just ridiculous, and it's the biggest thing you had to address this offseason outside of quarterback play. It was quarterback play, and it was how do you create some havoc? How do you hit opponents in the backfield a little bit more? How do you make it tougher on them? And, Wisconsin was 16th in the Big Ten in turnover margin last year. Some of that's luck, but some of that is you're not making opposing offenses uncomfortable enough. This is the type of guy that can do it. So you look at what they did last year, you look at what they had to improve on, and now you're seeing them already flash in spring. This is really, really good news for the Badgers. All right, let's continue on with Coach Mitchell had a bunch of other really interesting comments. I want to hit on them. On Michael Gardner said, quote, there's work to be done. So Michael Gardner, big transfer they got in this offseason. But he said it's difficult to find somebody that size, that's athletic. He has multiple years of eligibility, which excites us. There's a theme this entire offseason about bigger. They got bigger. They got bigger. And truthfully, they did. Garner, you're talking to 6'7" guy. Walker, big 6'6" guy. Parker Peterson. Charles Perkins. They're big everywhere, but you also have situationally a guy like Cheeks or a guy like Nicolas Clayton who can come in on that 3rd and 8 after hopefully your bigger bodies, create that 3rd and 8. And now you have somebody who can bend the edge and get pressure. So these two things have to work together, right? They're the engine and the drivetrain. They have to work together to make this defense more impactful. And it's super early. We're not going to get too far ahead of ourselves, but I like what I'm hearing so far. All right. Both these coaches that we're going to break down today, kind of what they said, because I think they both said some really interesting things. They continued to harp on the fact that they have to get better. That's another thing I want to say. They both understand the messaging. They both understand the mission here. And that mission is last year wasn't good enough. We weren't impactful enough. This entire offseason was geared towards we need to be better in those areas. We have to stop the run better, and we have to force TFLs, sacks, negative plays. We have to create more havoc. And both of them, Coach Mitchell and Coach Tressel, the linebackers coach and the DC, they are 100% in on that. And it was obvious, right? That those are obvious things you have to do, but it was nice to hear them address it and talk about it. At one point, I think it was Coach Tressel or Coach Mitchell, I forget which one, said, I don't have to tell you where we finished in tackles for loss last year. You guys know that, and it's unacceptable. So I thought that was good to hear. Let's talk about Daryl Peterson a little bit. So Coach Mitchell talked about Daryl Peterson. There's an interesting comment he had in there because for a couple of years, I've talked about the Paul Chris players that are still in the locker room and how that is transitioning and how this is really the start really of the Luke Fickell era. There's only a couple holdovers left. Daryl Peterson's one of those guys. And what Mitchell said about him, I think is pretty important here. Quote, he is hands down the leader in my room in regards to the standard at which we need to play, the physicality, the effort, and the attitude. I have a lot of respect for him. He was part of a transition in coaching staffs, and now he's part of a transition in defensive scheme. So two things there I want to unpack. We'll start with the latter. Now he's part of a transition in defensive scheme, which means they are changing what they did last year to this year, and he's part of that transition, providing that leadership. But he's also one of those last holdovers from the previous regime, and the fact that he is still being kind of that leader in that room, I think is important. I think that speaks to his character. I got to talk a little bit with Daryl last year. I practiced down in Platteville. He's really well respected in that room. So I don't know what his full role is going to be this year. He's bigger. I think he's definitely there to set the edge and stop the run. Passing situations, we're going to have to see. That's kind of where I hope they have a little more flexibility to bring in maybe a quicker guy. And then Peterson is maybe more that base edge. And then you bring in a Clayton, you bring in a Cheeks, maybe you bring in a Fearby, the other transfer they pulled in this offseason. So, but very cool to hear, the leadership from Peterson. Another one here on Sebastian Cheeks. And this is what I referenced a second ago. So Matt Mitchell talking about Sebastian Cheeks. He has got a sick get off. I mean, he puts a lot of pressure on tackles and tight ends because of his get off. I thought he was one of the bright spots last year in a defense that really struggled to get those pressures, to get those TFLs, those sacks. I thought he was one of the guys that looked the part. Because one thing I talked about, there was a lot of criticism with this defensive coaching staff last year getting maybe out schemed or not putting in enough wrinkles in to create pressure. But it's hard to have to scheme up every single pressure. You need a few guys who can just beat a block. If you have to scheme every single pressure because nobody wins their one-on-ones, no defensive coordinator is going to be successful with that. Could Tressel and Mitchell and the staff have been better last year? Absolutely. Because you don't have the 134th most talent in college football, and that's where you finished in TFLs. That's not the only metric to judge defenses by the way. They held up really well against spread teams in some other areas. But yeah, the coaching staff wasn't good enough last year, but there were also just not enough guys who could beat a tackle one-on-one, who could beat a tight end one-on-one. You need some of those players. You can't scheme up everything. You just need some people to win individuals at times. Cheeks did that last year, and it's nice to hear Mitchell again talk about his burst. He also went on to say that it's basically Cheeks and Clayton as the fastest guys in his room. Shouldn't surprise anybody. Both of those players are thoroughbreds, big-time athletes. But the Clayton stuff is worth getting excited over because if you're flashing early as a true freshman, especially at a position like that, you're going to play. I think you're going to play, and they need him to play because I don't know if they have another guy with quite his twitch. We're going to take a quick second there, come back, talk about Coach Tressel and a little bit more about the shift in mentality on this defense. That's coming up next, Locked On Badgers. But first, a quick break for friends of the show over at FanDuel. Listen, the NBA playoffs are almost here. They are absolutely coming up, and this is a great time to get started over on FanDuel, the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network. Right now, FanDuel is giving new users an incredible deal. $5 bet gets you $250 in bonus bets if your $5 bet wins. That's $250 you can spend on parlays, futures, teaser spreads. FanDuel's awesome because it makes betting so easy, simple. You don't have to be a pro at the sports books or grew up in Vegas. It is really fast and simple and easy and fun to get started. The user interface is clean and it is so simple to get your payouts when you win. That's why I use FanDuel. Don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com, claim your $250 in bonus bets today. All right, let's talk a little bit about what Coach Tressel had to say, the defensive coordinator. Again, talking today after practice. The first thing he said, and again, we've talked about this with Coach Mitchell, is he said, we need to create negatives. We need to create turnovers. We need to create takeaways. We need to dominate in the clutch. They both get it. They both understand where this defense wasn't good enough last year. And it's been a mission to upgrade the size, but also to be a little more aggressive. They both, talking today, emphasized, the defense has to be in more of an attack mode, has to go get it more. And some of that's a mentality shift. He said, so our edge players are going to have their hand in the dirt and they're going to be bigger. One of the things he mentioned was some of this is a mentality thing. Having your hand in the dirt isn't a scheme thing. It's a mentality thing. I would argue maybe it's some of both, but I get what he's saying, that you just, there's an element of you have to emphasize certain things more. And what you emphasize more is more of a mentality thing. It sounds like they're really focused on this year. We're going to be bigger, but we're also going to stop the run. If that means sacrificing something, maybe not dropping somebody as much, that's fine. We are going to be bigger. We're going to have hands in the dirt and we're going to stop the run. Yes. Thank you. That's what you got to do in the Big Ten. So, I think that, again, it's good to hear what we've all been clamoring for and talking about. Obvious things, yeah, probably, but you still got to hear them. You still got to do them. So I think that's good. Talking about Charles Perkins and JVR Suggs, he said Perkins and Suggs are both guys who at the 3 technique are big, strong dudes, but quite honestly have a little more twitch than we've been playing with. I'm just going to be honest with you. Big quote there. Now, he's certainly not trying to throw anybody under the bus, but quite honestly have a little more twitch than what we've been playing with. This is what we talked about a little bit last year. Some of those players you lost, physically, they just weren't quite as big or strong or as athletic as some of these players that are coming in. That's just the truth of it. You've heard it in several spots, right? Brady Collins has talked about how much bigger they are. He's been on this show. Now Mitchell's talking about how much bigger they are. It's not lip service. It's really easy in spring to get caught up in lip service. We're in the best shape of our lives. We're going to restore the standard. We're going to do everything different. Last year was unacceptable. All of that can be lip service. And portions of this can be as well. But one thing that is not lip service is they have absolutely gotten bigger. They've absolutely gotten bigger and stronger and more versatile, and they have more pieces in the front 7 they can use. That's not lip service. I'm telling you, that's 100% true. And that's going to help. I think it's going to help a lot. So you take what they did last year against some spread teams, the Oregons, some schools like that, where they were played pretty well, actually, against teams that tried to spread them out. Now, if you add in this physical element against the Iowas, against Penn State in that second half where they just kind of ran the ball down their throats, you might have a much more balanced, effective defense this year. He goes on to talk about Perkins again, just the energy he brings. That seems like one of the safe bets for one of the better portal pickups in the front 7. Charles Perkins, that 300-pounder they got. And then he goes on to talk about replacing Hunter Wohler as well. He said, no disrespect to Hunter Wohler, but we're excited for the progress Austin Brown has made. We're excited about Matt Young and Matt Trainer. So it's very, very early, of course, very, very early. But I like what I'm hearing. I like hearing that Nicolas Clayton is stepping up. I like hearing Sebastian Cheeks. I like hearing about Perkins and Suggs and some of the additional size. Peterson being a little bigger. I really like just the coach's mentality of last year wasn't good enough. Now we have to attack this year. We have to be more disruptive. We have to be more physical. I'm kind of getting optimistic, guys, and I'm excited to get down there. I think I'm going to be down at practice tomorrow to watch, but I do like a lot of what we're hearing from the defensive coaches about the progress in that front 7 and the potential to be a little more versatile, a little more explosive, and definitely tougher. All right, bunch more coming up this week. I think I'm going to be at practice tomorrow, so we'll do some practice reports out of that, and several people coming up. I think Brian Smith coming on to talk about some of the recent recruits as well. So on Wisconsin, appreciate y'all as always, and we will definitely talk later.